Long before roads crisscrossed our planet, empires spoke to each other across continents using hidden trails. These forgotten routes were the silent messengers of the ancient world, carrying more than just goods. They moved ideas, faith, and power between civilizations that never met face to face. In this journey, you will discover 28 of these lost pathways, from desert tracks trod by camel caravans to mountain passes navigated by daring traders. You will learn how a simple spice could build kingdoms, how rivers became highways for cultures, and why these routes vanished from memory. What secrets did they leave behind, and what can they teach us about human connection today? What do you believe is the most surprising thing ancient traders carried across continents? But we must look beyond the familiar name. The Silk Road was merely one thread in a vast, global web of exchange. From the scorching sands of the Sahara to the dense, steamy jungles of Mesoamerica, ancient engineers and traders carved out pathways that defied the natural world. These were not simple dirt trails. They were the superhighways of their time, meticulously planned and maintained, connecting empires that official records claimed knew nothing of each other. Imagine a Roman citizen holding a Chinese silk garment, or a Mayan priest utilizing a medicinal technique from deep in the Amazon. These connections were not just possible, they were commonplace, all thanks to routes that have since faded from memory. These paths moved more than luxury items. They were conduits for faith, carrying Buddhism from India to East Asia along northern trails, or facilitating the spread of Islam across desert trade networks. They transferred world-altering technologies like papermaking and gunpowder from east to west. They even carried unintended passengers like the bacteria that would cause plagues, silently traveling with traders and reshaping continents. The true marvel is that these journeys were undertaken without any of the tools we consider essential. There were no satellites, no detailed maps, and certainly no GPS. Travelers relied on the stars, on generations of orally passed down knowledge, and on a profound understanding of wind patterns, river currents, and animal migration paths. They read the landscape like a book, finding water in the desert and navigating mountain passes that would challenge modern hikers. This drive to explore, to connect, and to exchange ideas is a fundamental part of our human story. By uncovering these forgotten routes, we are not just learning about ancient trade. We are rediscovering the timeless links that have always bound us together, long before the first paved road was ever built. Our journey begins not with silk but with scent. Deep in the arid lands of southern Arabia, a precious substance wept from the bark of scraggly trees. This was frankincense, and to the ancient world, its sweet, smoky aroma was worth more than gold. Harvested in what is now Oman and Yemen, this resin, along with its sister myrrh, became the lifeblood of a daring overland network known as the Incense Route. For over 1,000 years, this was the only way these sacred goods could reach the temples and palaces of the Mediterranean. Camel caravans, sometimes thousands of animals strong, embarked on a perilous months-long journey across the empty quarter, one of the most forbidding deserts on Earth. The traders navigated by the stars and by ancestral knowledge, moving from one precious water hole to the next. They were not just merchants, they were survival experts, threading a needle through a landscape designed to kill. Their precious cargo was destined for the altars of Egyptian gods, for the funeral rites of Roman emperors, and for the rituals of Greek temples. Frankincense was burned to carry prayers to the heavens, and myrrh was used in the sacred practice of embalming, making these resins central to both life and death. But the caravans carried more than just perfume. They transported ideas, languages, and innovations across the desert. Arabian spices, knowledge of astronomy for navigation, and stories from distant cultures all hitched a ride on these smoky trails. The wealth generated built magnificent cities in the desert, like the rock-carved capital of Petra, which served as a crucial hub, its towering facades a testament to the route's immense profits. So why did this mighty land route vanish? The answer arrived on the tide. Roman sailors finally mastered the monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean, learning they could sail directly to the source of the incense, bypassing the grueling and expensive desert crossing almost entirely. Almost overnight, the caravan traffic dwindled, the oasis towns faded, and the sands slowly began to reclaim the tracks. Yet, if you know where to look, you can still find the ghost of this road. Deep grooves worn into bedrock by countless camel feet, ancient inscriptions left by lonely travelers, and the silent, grand ruins of Petra all whisper the story of the route that moved empires with nothing but a whisper of smoke. From the sun-baked deserts of Arabia, our path now leads north into the deep, shadowy forests of ancient Europe. Here, another treasure was being pried from the earth, not by the heat of the sun, but by the churning of the sea. The Baltic coast was the sole source of a magical substance known as amber, fossilized tree resin that glowed with the light of a captured sunset. This was the beginning of the Amber Road, a sprawling network of trails and riverways that connected the frigid north to the warm, marble heart of the Roman Empire. Unlike the organized caravans of the Incense Route, the Amber Road was a more decentralized, organic path. It was forged by countless individual traders who understood the immense value of this northern gold. They would brave treacherous terrain, navigating dense, uncharted woodlands, and following the powerful currents of great rivers like the Vistula and the Danube. Their goal was to transport the raw amber south, where Roman artisans would carve it into exquisite jewelry, decorative inlay for furniture, and powerful amulets believed to ward off evil. A single high-quality piece could fetch a fortune, making the perilous journey more than worthwhile. But these traders carried more than just pretty stones. They were the unwitting messengers between entirely different worlds. As they moved south, they brought with them the customs, technologies, and stories of the Germanic and Celtic tribes. On their return journeys north, they carried back Roman coins, glassware, and most importantly, new ideas about art, architecture, and social organization. This constant flow of goods and concepts slowly began to bridge a cultural gap that once seemed insurmountable. The true legacy of the Amber Road is etched into the map of modern Europe. What began as simple trading posts or safe fords across a river blossomed into some of the continent's most iconic cities. Vienna, Budapest, and Krakow can all trace their origins back to these early amber trading settlements. The road created pockets of prosperity and connection in a wild landscape, planting the seeds for future empires. Today, we can still touch this history. Archaeological digs along the route consistently uncover hoards of Roman coins and beautifully crafted amber ornaments, silent proof of a trade that once fueled the imagination of an entire civilization. Each piece of amber, holding within it a whisper of a primeval forest, is a tangible piece of this forgotten highway, a route that proved the desire for beauty could connect the most distant of worlds. While Roman nobles adorned themselves with northern gold, another precious commodity was brewing far to the east, one that would fuel a trade route across the roof of the world. High in the mist-shrouded mountains of Tibet, a society built on pastoral life craved a simple plant from the lower elevations. They needed tea. The high-altitude diet of meat and dairy created a powerful thirst for the leaves that aided digestion and provided a vital dose of vitamins. But the Tibetan plateau could not grow it. This necessity gave birth to one of history's most perilous commercial exchanges, the Tea Horse Road. For over 1,000 years, this network of narrow trails connected the lush tea gardens of China's Yunnan and Sichuan provinces with the stark, wind-swept plains of Tibet. The trade was beautifully simple in concept, yet brutally difficult in practice. Tibetan horses, small but incredibly hardy and vital for China's military campaigns, were swapped for tightly compressed bricks of tea, which became so central to Tibetan life they eventually functioned as a form of currency. This was not trade for luxury, but for survival and power. The journey these caravans undertook is almost unimaginable. Porters and traders navigated paths carved into the sides of cliffs, crossed swinging rope bridges over raging glacial rivers, and ascended passes so high the very air was thin and punishing. They braved sudden avalanches, ruthless bandits, and temperatures that could plummet in an instant. A single misstep could mean a fall of hundreds of feet. They moved in single file, a slow, determined thread of humanity and animals against a landscape of monumental scale. Yet this treacherous path was about more than just horses and tea. It became a slender, vital artery for culture. Buddhist monks traveled with the caravans, spreading religious teachings and artistic styles between monasteries that dotted the route. Han Chinese traders carried new technologies and ideas into Tibet, while Tibetan cultural influences flowed back the other way. This silent exchange in the high mountains helped weave the distinct fabrics of these two empires together, creating a shared history written in footsteps on a narrow trail. That history is not entirely lost. Certain remote stretches of the original Tea Horse Road can still be walked today by intrepid hikers. They can touch the same stone steps worn smooth by countless feet and see the ancient waymarkers that guided travelers through the blinding mist. To walk that path is to understand a different kind of strength, one built not on conquest, but on the resilient, enduring spirit of connection. The unforgiving mountains of the Tea Horse Road give way to an even more vast and intimidating emptiness, the greatest desert on our planet. To cross the Sahara was to defy death itself, a challenge so immense it forged empires. This was the domain of the Trans-Saharan trade routes, a web of trails that turned an ocean of sand into a bridge between worlds. For centuries, massive camel caravans, sometimes comprising thousands of animals and people, undertook a months-long pilgrimage across this barren expanse. Their survival depended on an intimate knowledge of the stars, the subtle patterns of wind-sculpted dunes, and the hidden locations of life-saving oases. The motivation for this immense risk was a simple yet powerful exchange: the gold of West Africa for the salt of the Sahara. In the tropical south, gold was plentiful, but salt, essential for preserving food and maintaining health, was desperately scarce. In the desert north, the reverse was true. This imbalance created an economy of epic scale, fueling the rise of legendary empires like Ghana and Mali, whose rulers were said to be among the wealthiest individuals in the world. The caravans carried far more than these two commodities. They transported ivory, exotic animal skins, and finely crafted goods from the African interior north to the Mediterranean coast. From there, these treasures entered European markets, shaping distant perceptions of a land of immense riches and mystery. But the most profound cargo was not tangible. Riding alongside the traders were Islamic scholars, bringing with them faith, literacy, and new concepts of law and governance. This cultural exchange transformed pivotal cities like Timbuktu from bustling trading posts into legendary centers of learning, home to vast libraries and renowned universities that attracted thinkers from across Africa and the Middle East. The rhythm of this cross-desert exchange defined the region for a millennium, until European ships began to sail down the West African coast, offering a new sea-based path for trade. Slowly, the great caravans dwindled and the silence of the desert returned. Yet the legacy of those who crossed it is indelible, written in the genetic and cultural DNA of millions, and in the enduring stories of Mansa Musa's famous pilgrimage, a journey so lavish it altered economies along its path. The wealth of empires was not always measured in gold or spices. Sometimes it was forged from a dull, grey metal found only in the farthest corners of the known world. For the mighty Roman Empire, the key to its military and economic power was bronze, an alloy that required one vital, elusive ingredient, tin. And the finest tin on Earth came from a misty, remote peninsula at the very edge of the map, Cornwall in Britain. To secure this essential resource, the Romans engineered a complex and dangerous supply line known as the tin routes. This was not a single road, but a multi-stage journey that tested the limits of ancient logistics. It began in the mines of Cornwall, where local tribes extracted the precious ore. From there, the raw tin was transported across the stormy English Channel to the continent, into the lands of Gaul, what we now call France. The next leg of the journey was perhaps the most ingenious, utilizing the natural highways of Europe, its great rivers. Heavy ingots were loaded onto shallow draft boats and floated down rivers like the Seine and the Rhone, moving the metal deep inland with remarkable efficiency. Where the rivers ended, the overland trails began, with ox-drawn carts carrying the cargo the final distance to Roman foundries. Understanding the immense value of this supply chain, the Roman military secured it fiercely. Legionary outposts and forts dotted the entire route from the British coast to the heart of Gaul. These soldiers were not there for conquest alone, but to protect the economic lifeblood of their civilization from bandits and rival tribes. Every sword, every piece of armor, every coin in the empire relied on the safe passage of this Cornish tin. The sheer scale of this operation is confirmed by the silent evidence left behind. Shipwrecks discovered off the coast of France have held their cargo for 2,000 years, their hulls still filled with distinctive tin ingots cast in British molds. These ghostly cargoes are tangible proof of a trade so vast it fueled an empire's expansion. This drive for a single resource pushed Roman engineering and military strategy to its limits, creating supply lines that were marvels of organization. The routes only faded when new tin sources were discovered in Spain and Germany, making the long, dangerous journey from Cornwall unnecessary. But for centuries, the demand for that simple grey metal shaped history, proving that the quest for raw materials could build roads, launch ships, and determine the fate of empires. Long before silk became the ultimate luxury, another stone captivated an entire civilization. Deep within the arid heart of Central Asia, a network of trails existed solely for the transport of a single, treasured material, nephrite jade. This was the Jade Road, a pathway that predates the famous Silk Road by centuries, connecting the rich jade mines of cotton in what is now Western China with the eager courts of ancient Chinese dynasties. The journey these traders undertook was one of the most punishing on Earth. They navigated the treacherous rim of the Taklamakan Desert, a place whose name translates ominously to the place of no return. Their survival depended on a fragile chain of oasis towns, tiny islands of green in a vast, lifeless sea of sand. They battled scorching daytime heat, freezing nights, and the ever-present threat of sudden, suffocating sandstorms that could erase a caravan in an instant. So why would anyone brave such a hellscape? The answer lies in the profound value of jade in Chinese culture. It was not merely a decorative stone, it was considered the essence of heaven and earth, a substance of pure spiritual power. Emperors were buried in suits made of thousands of jade pieces to achieve immortality. Ritual vessels and ceremonial blades were crafted from it, believing it could connect the human world with the divine. This deep cultural craving created a demand so powerful it willed a trade route into existence across one of the most hostile environments imaginable. The caravans moving west from China did not travel empty. They carried goods just as precious to the peoples of Central Asia, fine silks and sophisticated bronze weapons to trade for horses and the raw, uncut jade. This two-way exchange was the route's true power. It became an early conduit for ideas, long before the Silk Road formalized such contact. Artistic styles, metallurgical techniques, and even early religious concepts began to filter into China, subtly influencing the development of its unique civilization and craftsmanship. The legacy of the Jade Road is not found in grand ruins, but in the objects themselves. A ritual blade from the Shang dynasty, its jade handle worn smooth by centuries of use, contains within its beautiful green stone the story of an epic desert crossing. It is a silent witness to the incredible risks taken and the profound connections made, all for a piece of the earth that was believed to hold the very secrets of the universe. A different kind of riverine empire was being forged far to the north, not with gold or incense, but with raw ambition. From the frigid fjords of Scandinavia, the Vikings launched their iconic longships, but their story is far more complex than simple raiding. These master shipbuilders and navigators turned the river systems of Eastern Europe into their personal highways, carving a path to unimaginable wealth. They did not see the dense forests and wide rivers as barriers, but as a direct route to the two greatest empires of the age, Byzantium and the Abbasid Caliphate. Their vessels, designed with a miraculously shallow draft, could sail across open ocean and then be hauled or rowed up the winding, often hostile rivers of Russia. They mastered the Volga and the Dnieper using portages, areas where they would physically carry their ships overland between waterways to connect the Baltic Sea to the Black and Caspian Seas. This was a logistical nightmare transformed into a routine journey. What drove them to undertake such a perilous voyage? The north had immense natural resources, thick furs like sable and marten that were worth a fortune in the sun-baked markets of Baghdad and Constantinople. They also traded in amber and, tragically, in slaves, often captured from local Slavic tribes, a dark commodity that fueled their economic engine. In return, they sought the one thing their homeland lacked: silver. The Islamic world minted countless silver coins or dirhams, and millions of them flowed north along these river routes, payment for the luxuries of the cold forests. These coins are still found today in massive hoards across Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, silent proof of a trade network of staggering scale. But the Vikings did not just travel these routes, they settled them. To control the trade, they built fortified settlements at key strategic points, particularly along the Dnieper River. One of these trading posts, named Kiev, would grow from a Viking stronghold into the capital of a powerful Slavic state, Kievan Rus, the precursor to modern Russia and Ukraine. The cultural exchange was profound. Viking mercenaries, known as the Varangian Guard, became the elite personal protectors of the Byzantine Emperor in Constantinople, while Byzantine Christianity, art, and architecture slowly traveled back north, forever changing the cultural landscape of the region. The Viking waterways demonstrate that the most powerful routes are often those we cannot see, the liquid paths that carried not just goods, but the very seeds of new nations. Gold was the treasure of kings, but salt was the currency of life itself. Across West Africa, this humble mineral was not just a seasoning, it was a biological necessity in a hot climate where people lost vital salts through sweat. The salt roads emerged from this fundamental human need. creating a network of trails that turned the Sahara's barren heart into a bustling marketplace. The most famous of these was the Taghesa Trail, a path leading to mines so valuable they were built entirely from salt blocks, a town literally made of money. Here, in the blistering heat, laborers cut massive slabs of salt from the earth, each one destined for a long and perilous journey south. Camel caravans, often numbering in the hundreds, would load these heavy, crystalline blocks and embark on a weeks-long trek across the dunes. Their destination was the Great Bend of the Niger River, where the empires of the savannah awaited their precious cargo. The exchange rate was staggering, a testament to salt's immense value. In some markets, a single slab of salt could be traded for an equal weight in gold dust. But the trade was not just a two-way exchange. The South also offered kola nuts, a mild stimulant cherished in the North, creating a complex economy of desire and necessity. This constant flow of essential goods built and sustained legendary empires. The wealth of Mali, famously exemplified by Mansa Musa's pilgrimage, was built not just on gold, but on its control of the salt trade. Great cities rose at the crossroads of these routes. Jade, with its magnificent adobe mosque that seemed to grow from the earth, became a thriving hub where merchants from the desert and the forest met to negotiate under the hot sun. Its bustling markets were a symphony of languages and cultures, all brought together by the trade in white gold. Salt was so universally valued that it often bypassed currency altogether. People would break off small pieces to use in direct barter for food, cloth, or services, making it a true, living form of money you could literally taste. The decline of these roads was not born from a lack of need, but from the violent disruption of colonial trade networks that redirected Africa's wealth outward. Yet, the legacy of the salt roads is etched deep into the continent's social and economic DNA, a powerful reminder that the most vital routes are often forged not for luxury, but for simple, enduring survival. Far from the desert's thirst, the humid air of Southeast Asia carried its own intoxicating treasure. Here, a mosaic of islands held a monopoly on flavors that would define global history for centuries. This was the world of the spice routes, a complex web of maritime pathways centered on the Molucca Sea, long before European sails ever dotted the horizon. Indigenous traders in nimble outrigger canoes and Arab merchants in sturdy dhows navigated these treacherous waters, their holds filled with cargo more valuable than precious metals. They carried cloves from a handful of islands, nutmeg which grew almost nowhere else, and pungent black pepper, all destined for the palaces and pharmacies of China, India, and the Middle East. The motivation for such a dangerous journey was simple economics. In medieval Europe, a handful of nutmeg could buy a house, and a sack of peppercorns was a dowry for a princess. These spices did more than make food taste better. They were status symbols believed to have medicinal properties and were used in preservation. This immense value fueled not just wealth, but also brutal conflicts between local sultanates competing for control of the source. But the ships carried more than just aromatic buds and seeds. They were floating arcs of culture, transporting religious ideas across the sea lanes. Hinduism and Buddhism first arrived in Indonesia and mainland Southeast Asia via these trading connections, leaving behind magnificent temple complexes like Borobudur. Later, Islamic merchants from Gujarat and Arabia brought their faith, which gradually spread through the archipelago, transforming the spiritual landscape forever. Port cities like Malacca became melting pots where languages, customs, and cuisines blended into something entirely new. The legacy of these pre-colonial networks is a stark reminder that the age of exploration did not discover these routes. It violently inserted itself into them. The desire for control over these spices would ultimately draw European powers into the region, leading to colonization and conflict. Yet the original routes reveal a different story, one of organic connection and cultural fusion, all sparked by the universal human desire for a taste of the exotic. Across the Pacific, another metal forged its own network of empires. Deep in the mountains of western Mexico, the Purépecha people of Michoacán controlled a resource as vital as any spice or gemstone, vast deposits of copper. From these mines emerged a sprawling trade network that stitched together the diverse civilizations of ancient Mesoamerica, long before the Aztec Empire rose to power. This was the Copper Trail, a complex system of footpaths and canoe routes that moved this precious metal across incredible distances. Traders carried heavy loads of raw copper ore and finished goods on their backs along rugged mountain trails, then transferred their cargo to canoes that navigated coastal waters and river systems, reaching cultures as far away as the Maya in the Yucatan. For these societies, copper was not merely a utilitarian metal. While it was indeed hammered into efficient tools and sharp weapons, its true value was often ceremonial and spiritual. Artisans crafted it into exquisite ornaments, elaborate bells that rang in religious ceremonies, and finely detailed ritual items believed to hold divine power. The possession of such objects was a direct symbol of status and a connection to the gods. The exchange of these goods was far more than simple commerce. It was a diplomatic language. The flow of copper from the Purépecha heartland helped solidify political alliances and fostered a vibrant exchange of ideas. Artistic styles, religious symbols, and technological knowledge traveled alongside the metal traders, creating a shared cultural fabric across Mesoamerica that archaeologists are only now beginning to fully appreciate. Evidence from sites like the great metropolis of Teotihuacan reveals a surprising sophistication in their metallurgy, suggesting a deep and well-established knowledge that was likely transferred through these trade connections. This intricate web of exchange underscores a profound truth. The Americas were a deeply interconnected world of their own, with empires talking, trading, and influencing one another for centuries. The arrival of Europeans did not discover a new world. It encountered a complex old one whose silent, well-worn paths were already humming with the traffic of ideas and innovation. While the southern Silk Road battled the dunes, a cooler, greener path offered a vital alternative. This was the northern branch, a route that carefully traced the foothills of the Tian Shan Mountains, avoiding the deadly Taklamakan Desert below. Travelers here traded the threat of sandstorms for the challenge of mountain passes, but they were rewarded with more reliable access to water and grassland for their animals. This made the journey marginally less perilous, allowing for a steadier flow of goods between China and the West. The caravans moving along this route carried the expected luxuries of silk and spices, but also something far more revolutionary: paper. This lightweight, durable technology for recording information began its slow journey west, where it would eventually transform administrations and scholarship across the Islamic world and Europe. In return, Central Asian horses and glassware flowed east, each caravan a moving bazaar of innovation. This constant exchange nurtured magnificent cities at the crossroads. Samarkand blossomed into a legendary metropolis, its bustling markets a symphony of languages where Persian, Chinese, and Turkish traders negotiated under ornate blue-tiled domes. But the northern branch carried more than material wealth. It became a quiet highway for faith. Buddhist monks from India traveled this route into China, translating sutras and establishing monasteries that dotted the landscape. Perhaps more surprisingly, Nestorian Christians, a sect that had spread east from Persia, also found their way along these trails. They established communities deep in Central Asia and even left behind the famous Nestorian stele in China, a stone monument that tells their story. The existence of this northern path reveals a crucial truth about these ancient networks. They were not single, rigid roads, but fluid, adaptable systems. Traders and travelers could choose their path based on politics, weather, or bandit activity, demonstrating a remarkable resilience. The Silk Road was never one road. It was a constantly shifting web of possibilities, and the northern branch was one of its most successful and enduring threads. While the spice routes thrived on the sea and the copper trail connected Mesoamerica, one empire decided to build a highway of its own design, one that would become the blueprint for all others. The Persian Empire under Darius I was a colossal realm, stretching from the Nile River to the Indus Valley. Governing such a vast territory required more than just military might. It demanded a system of unparalleled control and communication. The solution was a feat of engineering so ambitious it would be remembered for millennia: the Royal Road. This was not a simple dirt path worn down by generations of travelers. It was a purpose-built, meticulously maintained stone highway stretching an astonishing 2,500 kilometers from the Grand Palace at Susa in modern-day Iran all the way to Sardis in Turkey. Its primary function was to bind the empire together with unmatched speed and efficiency. A relay of royal messengers on horseback could traverse the entire distance in just 7 days, a journey that would take an ordinary caravan 3 months. They rode day and night, switching to fresh mounts at 111 carefully spaced way stations, carrying the decrees of the king to every corner of the realm. This system was so effective that the Greek historian Herodotus marveled at it, writing, "There is nothing in the world that travels faster than these Persian couriers." But the road was far more than a postal service. It allowed the Persian army to move with shocking speed, deploying legions to quell rebellions or secure borders before news of their approach had even spread. This rapid military response was a key pillar of Persian power, making rebellion a far riskier prospect for any disgruntled satrap or provincial governor. Yet, the Royal Road also pulsed with commercial life. Caravans of traders moved safely under the protection of the king's peace, transporting luxurious Babylonian textiles, aromatic spices from the east, and intricate goldwork. This constant flow of goods and people did more than just make merchants wealthy. It created a cultural exchange that would deeply influence the Greek world, and later the Romans who conquered it. The road itself was an engineering marvel. Persian builders constructed sturdy bridges over impassable gorges, carved pathways through stubborn mountain rock, and installed clear mile markers. The way stations provided not just fresh horses, but food, lodging, and security for official travelers, functioning like ancient motels. This attention to detail and scale set a new standard for what infrastructure could achieve. The legacy of the Royal Road is found in the empires that followed. When Roman engineers began laying down their famous network of roads, they were following a Persian model, perfecting a system of control and connection first pioneered by Darius. That original highway may have faded back into the earth, but its idea paved the way for the world to come. A continent away from Persia's stone highways, a liquid empire flowed through the heart of North America. The Mississippi River and its countless tributaries formed the most extensive transportation network on the continent long before European arrival. For the sophisticated Mississippian culture and their neighbors, these waterways were not barriers, they were interstates. In massive, masterfully crafted dugout canoes, capable of carrying tons of cargo and dozens of people, traders navigated a system that stretched from the icy waters of the Great Lakes all the way down to the warm currents of the Gulf of Mexico. They moved with the seasons, using the river's flow to their advantage, connecting ecological zones that were worlds apart. From the north came precious copper, mined from the shores of Lake Superior and painstakingly hammered into ceremonial headdresses and ritual objects. From the south came dazzling shells from the Gulf Coast, like the lightning whelk, which artisans carved into intricate gorgets and cups that shimmered with distant sea magic. And from the fertile river valleys themselves came the most vital commodity of all, surplus agricultural produce. The Mississippians were master farmers, cultivating vast fields of corn, beans, and squash, and this food surplus became a form of wealth and a tool for diplomacy, traded up and down the river to communities in less fertile land. This constant, fluid exchange did more than move objects, it built a shared world. Religious ideas, artistic styles, and even games like Chunky spread along these routes, creating a common cultural language across thousands of miles. The greatest evidence of this network's power is the city of Cahokia. Located near the confluence of the Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers, Cahokia was not an isolated wonder. It was the nexus, the grand central station of this aquatic trade web. Its towering mounds, including the immense Monk's Mound, required a vast supply of labor and resources that could only be sustained through its central role in this economy. The finely crafted goods found in its elite burials, made from materials sourced from hundreds of miles away, tell a story of a city plugged into a continent-spanning exchange system. This indigenous network did not fade from obsolescence. It was shattered by the arrival of Europeans. Old world diseases raced ahead of explorers, decimating populations and collapsing the complex social structures that maintained the trade. Later colonial policies deliberately disrupted these ancient connections. Yet, the legacy of the Mississippi trade network endures, a powerful testament to the innovation and connectivity of Native American civilizations, who built a thriving, interconnected world using nothing but the strength of their arms and the currents of the great river. These ancient river highways were not the only way to move a world. Long before the Mississippi's currents were ever charted, another network was being mapped not by foot, but by sail across the vast, open expanse of the Arabian Sea. The first sailors to brave these waters were not from the great classical empires, but from the dawn of civilization itself. They were Mesopotamians from the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, Harappans from the sophisticated cities of the Indus Valley, and Egyptians from the Nile. Their ships, sturdy vessels built of reeds and wood, were tiny specks on a terrifyingly huge ocean, yet they embarked on journeys of hundreds of miles with a courage that still inspires awe. Their secret weapon was not a tool, but a wind. They learned to read the seasonal monsoon patterns, those mighty breaths of the planet that blow from the southwest in summer and reverse to the northeast in winter. By timing their voyages perfectly, a captain could catch a steady tailwind to his destination, then wait a few months for the winds to change and carry him home. This profound understanding of nature turned a perilous sea into a predictable highway. These were not voyages of conquest, but of connection. The logs of these ancient traders speak of a triangular trade between mighty civilizations. From the island of Dilmun, what we now call Bahrain, came gleaming pearls fished from its rich beds and precious dates from its oasis groves. From the mysterious land of Meluha, the Indus Valley civilization, came exotic hardwoods, intricate ivory carvings, and probably cotton textiles, a fabric so revolutionary it would one day clothe the world. In return, Mesopotamia sent out its finely woven woolens and its abundant stores of grain. This exchange was so vital that it was meticulously recorded on clay tablets, some of which survived to tell the tale. But these ships carried invisible cargo that was far more transformative than any pearl. They were floating melting pots where languages met and merged. The Akkadian word for sea captain may have its roots in the ancient Indus language. Technologies were exchanged at every port, with shipbuilding techniques and navigational secrets passing from one culture to another, each iteration creating a stronger, more seaworthy vessel. This web of contact created a shared cultural zone around the Indian Ocean, a foundation of trust and mutual understanding that later traders from Greece, Rome, and Arabia would build upon. The legacy of these first mariners is written on the water itself. Modern shipping lanes between the Gulf and India follow almost the exact same paths those reed ships took 4,000 years ago. The cultural ties they forged still bind the region, a testament to humanity's enduring drive to reach across the horizon, not for glory but for the simple, profound act of trade. While grand empires traded across continents, a quieter network hummed with life along the chilly shores of the Baltic Sea. Local tribes knew the coastline's secret, that the sea itself would gift them treasure after a storm. They walked well-worn paths, their eyes scanning the pebbled beaches for the sun-colored stones washed ashore, the raw amber that would become their key to the wider world. These amber coast trails were the essential beginning of every piece of amber that eventually found its way to Rome. The collection was a communal effort, often tied to the seasons and the moods of the sea. But this was far more than a simple gathering operation. These local paths formed a dense, regional web that connected Baltic tribes to each other long before any Roman trader arrived with offers of silver and wine. The trails followed the natural lines of the land, tracing rivers inland from the coast, skirting ancient bogs, and linking together settlements that specialized in different crafts. One village might be known for its skill in polishing the rough amber nuggets into gleaming beads and pendants, while another possessed the knowledge to carve it into intricate animal totems. This local trade in finished goods was vibrant and essential, building a shared culture and economy. The true power of these trails, however, was their role as a feeder system into the larger amber road. The raw amber, or the finely worked local pieces, would be traded at regional meeting points to foreign merchants. In exchange, the Baltic tribes received goods they could not produce themselves, like bronze for making stronger tools and weapons, or fine Roman ceramics and glassware that became prized status symbols in their communities. But the value of amber here was not just economic, it was deeply spiritual. These coastal people believed the material held the power of the sun, captured within the earth and then released by the sea. It was considered magical, a talisman for protection and a sacred object in rituals. Some of the most beautiful pieces were never traded at all, but were buried with chieftains or offered to the gods in secluded bogs and sacred groves along these very trails. This highlights a profound truth about ancient trade. The glittering global networks we remember were entirely dependent on these intricate local systems, built on generations of intimate knowledge. The Roman noblewoman wearing an amber necklace never knew the names of the people who walked the coast after a winter gale, but her luxury and the connection it represented began with their footsteps on a windswept local trail. High in the roof of the world, where the air is thin and the wind bites with a cold that feels ancient, a different kind of trade was conducted. The Himalayan passes, like the formidable Nangpa La, were not routes for luxury but for survival and spirit. They served as the fragile bridges between the high plateau of Tibet and the lush valleys of Nepal and India, a journey that demanded everything from those who dared it. Caravans of yaks, their thick fur coated in ice, carried the unique products of the Tibetan highlands, heavy blocks of salt and coarse, warm wool down to the lower elevations. In return, they brought back the one thing the high, cold desert could not provide: grain. This was a trade of fundamental necessity, a barter system that literally fed empires. But these treacherous paths carried a far more precious cargo than food and salt. They became the primary artery for the flow of Buddhism out of India and into Tibet. Pilgrims, monks, and scholars walked in the footsteps of traders, braving the same avalanches and oxygen-starved altitudes in pursuit of enlightenment rather than profit. They carried sacred texts, intricate religious statues, and profound philosophical ideas, transforming the spiritual landscape of entire nations. The influence of this exchange is still visible today in the architecture of monasteries that cling to the mountainsides and in the shared rituals practiced on both sides of the passes. For expanding empires, particularly the Tibetan and later the Mongol Yuan dynasty, control over these passes was a strategic imperative. They were not just trade routes, they were channels for diplomacy, allowing emissaries and armies to move between realms and enabling resource sharing on a scale that could determine the fate of a kingdom. To walk these paths today is to understand a trade defined by faith and endurance. The thin air, the staggering views, the constant reminder of danger, all speak to a journey where the act of moving itself was a form of devotion, and every successful crossing was a testament to the human will to connect against impossible odds. The shimmer of Saharan gold was not a myth, but a magnetic force that drew entire empires into the desert's heart. While the broader Trans-Saharan Routes moved many goods, specific paths like the legendary trail from the gold fields of Wangara to the markets of Morocco were dedicated solely to this precious metal. The kingdoms of West Africa, like Ghana and later Mali, sat atop a geological fortune, controlling access to mines that seemed to produce an endless supply of gold, dust, and nuggets. This wealth was not hoarded in secret vaults, but strategically channeled north across the dunes. The caravans that undertook this journey were monumental undertakings, often comprising 1,000 camels or more, each animal laden with leather pouches of gold. They moved in a carefully orchestrated procession, their safety ensured by units of Tuareg or Berber guards, fierce desert warriors hired to protect the empire's lifeblood from raiders. The value of their cargo was so immense that its arrival could shift economies. In exchange for the gold, the South received what it desperately lacked: vast slabs of Saharan salt and finely woven textiles from North Africa. This was a trade of necessity meeting desire, and it generated profits on an almost unimaginable scale. It was this gold trade that directly financed the zenith of West African civilization. The legendary wealth of Mansa Musa, the Emperor of Mali, was not just personal, it was imperial. His famous pilgrimage to Mecca in the 1300s, where he distributed so much gold that its value plummeted in Cairo for a decade, was a stunning display of economic power sourced directly from these desert trails. That wealth built more than just a ruler's reputation. It constructed cities of the mind, the great universities and libraries of Timbuktu, where thousands of scholars studied astronomy, law, and medicine, were funded by the taxes and profits from the gold trade. The gold trails show us that metal alone does not build empires, but the control of its flow certainly can, forging political power and enabling a golden age of learning in the most unexpected of places. Deep within the steamy jungles of Mesoamerica, another kind of engineering marvel challenged the landscape. The Maya and Aztec empires did not simply follow trails, they built them, carving raised stone highways known as Sacbeob directly through the dense, unforgiving wilderness. These were not mere paths but sophisticated causeways, elevated above the swampy ground and paved with white limestone plaster that gleamed under the sun, visible for miles. They functioned as the formal road system of their world, connecting powerful city-states across miles of what was otherwise impenetrable terrain. The logistics of their construction were staggering, requiring not just labor, but a deep understanding of materials and drainage to prevent the jungle from immediately reclaiming the stone. A Sacbeob was a statement of power, a permanent declaration that an empire's will could tame the wild. Along these smooth, white roads moved the lifeblood of Mesoamerican commerce. Porters carried precious loads of green jade from distant mines, vibrant quetzal feathers from highland cloud forests, and perhaps most importantly, sacks of cacao beans which were used as currency throughout the region. These causeways ensured that trade could flow reliably, binding together a civilization that lacked pack animals or wheeled carts, but their purpose was far greater than economics. These roads were sacred pathways, often connecting major temple complexes and leading directly to ceremonial plazas. A journey along a Sacbeob was not just a physical trip from one city to another. It was a pilgrimage, a movement through a ritual landscape designed to reinforce the connection between the human world and the divine. The most powerful rulers used these roads for grand processions, demonstrating their authority to the people by literally walking atop a symbol of their empire's organizational might. The Spanish conquest did not just topple governments, it shattered this infrastructure. The causeways without maintenance were slowly swallowed by the voracious jungle, their white plaster fading beneath vines and soil. For centuries, they were forgotten. Today, archaeologists peeling back the layers of vegetation are rediscovering the sheer scale of this network, and with it, a new appreciation for pre-Columbian urban planning. These raised roads reveal a society that thought in terms of systems and connections, proving that the true ambition of an empire can be measured by the roads it builds to unite itself. While empires traded gold and salt, the ultimate symbol of purity and wealth was fished from the seabed itself. For thousands of years, the warm, shallow waters of the Indian Ocean held a treasure that required no mining, only immense courage to retrieve. This was the domain of the pearl divers, whose seasonal voyages wove a less visible but equally vital web known as the pearl routes. From the Persian Gulf to the shores of Sri Lanka, these divers would free dive to astonishing depths on a single breath, their bodies weighted down by stones to scour oyster beds for the rare, perfect orb. The pearls they harvested were not mere baubles, they were universal currency of status, adorning the necks of Roman empresses, Chinese royalty, and Indian maharajas. A single, flawless pearl could command a price that would sustain a diver's family for a lifetime, a gamble that made the tremendous risk worthwhile. This trade dictated the rhythm of entire communities. The diving season was a time of intense, coordinated effort. Specialized boats, often family-owned, would set out to known fishing grounds, carrying teams of divers and their support crew. The entire economy of coastal towns from Bahrain to Mannar was built around this seasonal harvest, with everyone from rope makers to gem polishers finding their role in the chain. The pearls did not stay local for long. Arab and Indian merchants in sturdy dhows would transport the precious cargo along well-established coastal routes. They sailed to major ports where they would meet traders from the Roman world, who called the Persian Gulf Pearl Bay, and from the Han Dynasty in China, whose records speak of receiving these luminous gems from the West. This was a trade that moved slowly, dictated by monsoon winds, but with a reach that connected 3 continents. The legacy of the pearl routes is found not in sunken ships, but in the cultural DNA of the region. The shared knowledge of boat building, the lunar calendars used to predict the best diving conditions, and the unique songs sung to time a diver's breath and speed his return, all spread from port to port. This created a connected maritime world that understood the ocean's dangers and its riches intimately. The trade's eventual decline came not from a lack of pearls or demand, but from human ingenuity, the invention of cultured pearls in the early 20th century. Yet, for millennia, the desire for this natural wonder forged bonds across the Indian Ocean. proving that the most delicate objects could create the most resilient connections. Their maritime networks were matched by a terrestrial sea of grass, the vast Eurasian steppe. This immense corridor of open land, stretching from Hungary to the borders of China, was not a barrier but a superhighway for nomadic cultures. For millennia, tribes like the formidable Scythians, masters of the horse and bow, used this natural pathway to move goods and ideas across continents with a speed that settled empires could scarcely comprehend. Their mobility was their greatest asset, allowing them to create a fluid, dynamic trade network built on horseback. They moved the raw materials of the ancient world, transporting heavy loads of Baltic amber to the east, exchanging Siberian furs for finely crafted Greek metalwork, and driving herds of hardy steppe ponies south to the stables of Persian kings and Chinese emperors. These horses were not just animals, they were the engines of war and agriculture, and control over their supply could shift the balance of power between entire civilizations. This constant movement did more than move objects. It became the fastest conduit for cultural diffusion the world had ever seen. The revolutionary technology of horseback riding, including the saddle and the stirrup, raced across these grasslands. Advanced metalworking techniques for crafting stronger weapons and tools traveled from the workshops of the Black Sea coast all the way to the nomadic smiths of Mongolia. Even artistic styles like the distinctive animal art of the steppes found its way into the courts of settled kingdoms who prized its wild, energetic beauty. The ultimate expression of the steppe route's power was the Mongol Empire. Its breathtaking expansion was not a sudden explosion, but the culmination of centuries of logistical knowledge perfected on these very grasslands. The Mongols did not conquer in spite of the distances, they conquered because of them. Their legendary Yam courier system, a network of horse relay stations that enabled a message to cross 6,000 kilometers in mere weeks, was simply the formal, imperial version of the informal nomadic trade routes that had existed for ages. This system allowed Genghis Khan to command an army spread across a continent, moving troops and supplies with an efficiency that left their enemies paralyzed. The story of the steppe routes forces us to reconsider who the true connectors of the ancient world were. It was not always the emperors in their marble palaces or the merchants in their walled cities. Often it was the nomadic cultures moving with the seasons who wove the threads between the great settled civilizations, proving that sometimes the most powerful routes are not paved with stone but with grass. Giant cedar trees, towering and ancient, were not just part of the landscape for the peoples of the Pacific Northwest, they were the vessels of empire. Master carvers transformed these massive logs into sleek, ocean-going canoes, some large enough to carry 50 people and tons of cargo across the open waters of the Pacific. This was not a simple coastal trade. It was a maritime highway running thousands of kilometers from Alaska down to California, a liquid road built on skill and courage. The Haida, Tlingit, and other nations were not just traders. They were some of the most sophisticated mariners the world has ever known, reading the subtle signs of the ocean with an expertise honed over millennia. They navigated by the behavior of birds, the patterns of waves, and the position of the sun and stars, guiding their vessels through treacherous currents and sudden, dense fogs. Their cargo was the wealth of their world, and it moved along this aquatic network in a constant flow. Smoked salmon from the prolific rivers was traded for the prized dentalium shells from the south, which functioned as a form of money. Vast blankets woven from the inner bark of cedar trees, displaying intricate crests and stories, were exchanged for precious oils extracted from the eulachon, a small smelt fish. This oil was a concentrated source of calories and nutrients, a vital trading commodity sometimes called grease gold. But this system also had a dark facet: the trade in slaves captured during raids, a practice that underscored the complex and often violent social hierarchies that this wealth created. The accumulation of goods through this trade directly fueled the region's famous potlatch ceremonies, where chiefs would demonstrate their power and status by giving away immense quantities of wealth. This maritime economy supported an artistic and cultural explosion. The distinctive formline art, carved into towering totem poles and painted onto house fronts, was a direct result of this prosperity, a visual language that displayed family lineages, stories, and rights to resources gained through trade. The routes did not vanish with the arrival of Europeans. They were co-opted and then suppressed by colonial policies that disrupted indigenous economies and banned cultural practices like the potlatch. Yet, the knowledge never fully disappeared. Today, there is a powerful movement of cultural revitalization, with new generations once again carving traditional canoes and retracing these ancient water routes. This is not just a reenactment, it is a reclaiming of identity, a powerful testament to the endurance of a network that connected a civilization not by land but by sea. Deep within the continent's equatorial heart, where the air hangs thick and the forest canopy blocks the sun, another treasure moved silently toward the coast. The African ivory routes were not a single path, but a sprawling network of trails leading from the dense interior forests to the bustling Swahili city-states of the Indian Ocean. For centuries, these pathways carried one of the ancient world's most sought-after luxuries, elephant tusks. This trade was a complex chain of hands, beginning with local hunters and intermediaries from inland communities who possessed the profound knowledge needed to track and harvest the ivory. They would trade the heavy, raw tusks to merchants at regional markets, who then organized caravans for the long, arduous journey to the coast. The final destination was cities like Kilwa and Zanzibar, where skilled artisans transformed the raw material into objects of breathtaking beauty and extreme value. They carved it into intricate religious statues for temples in India, fashioned it into delicate piano keys for European salons, and shaped it into ornate combs and jewelry for elites across Asia. This demand created immense wealth for the Swahili coast, financing the construction of magnificent coral stone palaces and mosques, but this commercial exchange carried a heavy, unintended cost. The relentless demand began to deplete elephant populations near the established routes, forcing hunters to venture deeper into unexplored territory. This cycle of pursuit and extraction reveals a timeless pattern, where the desire for exotic goods in distant markets can drive both exploration and exploitation, reshaping ecosystems and economies in its wake. The story of the ivory routes is a poignant lesson from the past, echoing into our present, about the delicate balance between human desire and the preservation of the natural world. While the northern routes bustled with merchants, a far more treacherous path snaked its way through the jagged spine of the Karakoram Mountains. This was the southern branch of the Silk Road, a brutal corridor of ice and rock that connected the lush plains of India with the arid plateaus of Central Asia. The journey was not for the faint of heart. Caravans navigated narrow passes where a single misstep could send a man or a mule plummeting thousands of feet into glacial abysses. They braved sudden, crushing avalanches and the constant, thin air sickness of high altitude. Yet, for centuries, this forbidding trail pulsed with life, precisely because the rewards for surviving it were so immense. From India came the wealth of the subcontinent, sacks of pungent black pepper and turmeric, along with brilliantly dyed cotton textiles that were unlike anything produced elsewhere. In return, Central Asia sent horses, lapis lazuli, and other precious goods eastward, but the most valuable cargo was not measured in weight or coin. It was carried in the minds of the travelers who dared the crossing. This route became a sacred highway for the spread of Buddhism. The most famous pilgrim was the Chinese monk Xuanzang, who in the 7th century made his epic 17-year journey to India along these very trails to collect sacred Buddhist scriptures. His detailed accounts provide a breathtaking window into this world of peril and faith. He described the essential cooperation required to survive, as diverse caravans of traders, pilgrims, and local guides had to work together, sharing resources and knowledge to overcome the mountain's deadly challenges. This interdependence forced a level of cultural exchange and tolerance that was rare for the time. Monasteries sprang up in the high valleys, offering sanctuary and becoming centers of learning where languages and ideas were translated and shared. The southern branch demonstrates that the most difficult paths often foster the deepest connections, where the shared struggle for survival could blur the lines between commerce and creed, creating a legacy far richer than any spice. While empires traded in stones and metals, the most coveted color in the ancient world was born from a humble sea creature. Along the coast of the eastern Mediterranean, Phoenician artisans held a secret that would dye history itself. They harvested a specific type of sea snail, the murex, and through a complex, foul-smelling process, extracted a tiny gland that produced a unique liquid. When exposed to sunlight, this secretion transformed from a dull yellow into a deep, vibrant, and shockingly color-fast purple. This was Tyrian purple, and its value was beyond measure. The staggering effort required was the source of its worth. It could take 12,000 snails to yield just a single gram of dye, enough to color the trim of a single garment. This immense labor meant that a robe dyed entirely in Tyrian purple could cost more than its weight in solid gold. It became the ultimate status symbol, a color so intrinsically linked to power that its use was legally restricted to the highest echelons of society. Roman emperors decreed that only they could wear a full toga of this purple, and the phrase, "born in the purple," described a child born to a reigning emperor destined for the throne. The Phoenicians, master mariners, built their entire economic empire on this liquid treasure. Their ships, sturdy and fast, did not need to brave the open ocean. They traced the coastline of the Mediterranean, a sea they effectively turned into their own commercial highway, establishing trading posts and colonies from Carthage in North Africa to Cadiz in Spain. At each port, they traded amphorae filled with the precious dye, along with their famous blown glass and cedar wood. In return, they received silver, tin, and other raw materials, fueling their thalassocracy, their sea-based empire. The influence of this trade rippled through the classical world. Greek aristocrats coveted purple-dyed fabrics for their ceremonial robes, and later, Roman senators proudly displayed their rank with a broad purple stripe on their togas. The Phoenician purple dye industry created the first luxury brand, a product so desirable it shaped fashion, defined social hierarchies, and financed a network of colonies that would challenge Rome itself. The legacy of this trade is woven into our language. The very word Phoenician is derived from the Greek word for purple. It stands as a powerful reminder that in the ancient economy, the greatest power could be held not in a mine or a field, but in a vat of dye, painstakingly extracted from the depths of the sea. The rugged spine of the Andes Mountains presents a landscape of sheer impossibility, a vertical world of jagged peaks and plunging valleys. Yet the Inca Empire did not see barriers, they saw a challenge to be mastered. Their solution was the Capac Ñan, a monumental road system spanning an astonishing 40,000 kilometers, an engineering feat that stitched together an empire stretching from modern-day Colombia all the way down to Chile. This was not a single path, but a complex web of highways, all converging on the sacred capital of Cusco, the navel of the Inca world. The roads were meticulously planned and constructed, carved directly into mountain slopes, paved with stone, and supported by retaining walls that have withstood centuries of earthquakes. They traversed some of the most extreme geography on the planet, from coastal deserts to cloud forests perched at 4,000 meters above sea level. To cross the deep river gorges that sliced through the mountains, Inca engineers performed what can only be described as structural magic. They waved suspension bridges from sturdy grass fibers, structures so strong they could support a column of Spanish conquistadors on horseback. These were not permanent structures, but part of a living system, rebuilt by local communities each year in a ritual that reinforced their connection to the empire and its infrastructure. The true genius of this system, however, was not in the stone but in its purpose. The Capac Nyan was the central nervous system of the largest empire in the pre-Columbian Americas. Along these roads moved not just goods but information at a speed that defied the terrain. A corps of highly trained relay runners known as chasquis operated a postal service of breathtaking efficiency. Stationed at small posts called tambos spaced a day's run apart, a runner would receive a verbal message or a knotted string record known as a quipu, and then sprint to the next post to deliver it to a fresh, waiting runner. Using this method, a message could travel up to 240 kilometers in a single day, connecting the emperor in Cusco to the farthest reaches of his domain with an authority that felt almost instantaneous. The roads also moved the empire's wealth. Porters and llama caravans transported everything from sacks of nutritious quinoa and freeze-dried potatoes from the highlands to delicate textiles and fine pottery from specialized crafting villages. Strategically placed storehouses dotted the route, stockpiled with food and supplies that could support imperial armies on the move or provide relief for communities hit by a poor harvest. This flow of goods and people did more than just sustain an economy. It integrated a vast mosaic of conquered cultures, weaving them into a single, cohesive imperial identity under the watchful eye of the Sapa Inca. The Spanish were awestruck by what they found, but their conquest and the introduction of the horse and cart ultimately broke this system apart, as wheels could not travel where Inca feet had run. Today, the most famous remnant of this network is the trail to Machu Picchu, a mere fraction of the original vast system. Hikers walking those ancient stones are touching the backbone of a vanished empire, a testament to the human will to connect, to communicate, and to conquer distance itself, long before the first modern road was ever dreamed of. While the Mediterranean traded in purple and the Andes in potatoes, Northern Europe's greatest asset was a field of golden grain. The fertile plains of Poland and Prussia became the breadbasket for a continent, their surplus harvest feeding the rapid growth of cities from London to Bruges. This was not a luxury trade but one of fundamental sustenance, and it gave rise to the Baltic grain routes, a sprawling maritime network that would determine the fate of nations. Vast quantities of rye and wheat were loaded onto the sturdy cog ships of the Hanseatic League at ports like Gdansk, known then as Danzig. These vessels then sailed across the Baltic and North Seas, their holds bursting with the harvest that would stave off famine in urban centers where populations were booming but farmland was scarce. The sheer scale of this operation was staggering, turning the Baltic into a liquid highway for one of life's most basic necessities. This trade required a logistical brilliance we rarely associate with the medieval world. It was not enough to simply ship the grain. It had to be stored, protected from moisture and pests, and transported across multiple legal and economic zones. The Hanseatic League, a coalition of merchant guilds and their towns, mastered this system. They established contours, fortified trading posts in key cities like Bruges and London, which acted as secure hubs for storage and distribution. They negotiated complex treaties that gave them tax exemptions and legal privileges, ensuring their ships could move the grain efficiently and profitably. The power this generated was immense, allowing the Hanseatic League to field its own navy and influence the politics of kingdoms, all backed by the simple, undeniable power of food. The wealth from this grain trade did more than fill merchant coffers. It literally built the landscapes we see today. The profits financed the construction of the magnificent brick Gothic churches that still dominate the skylines of northern German and Baltic cities. It funded the expansion of ports, the paving of streets, and the rise of a merchant class whose influence would eventually challenge the old feudal order. This flow of agricultural surplus was the essential fuel for European urbanization, allowing populations to concentrate in cities and specialize in crafts, trade, and governance, setting the stage for the Renaissance and the modern world. The humble grain ship, therefore, was not just a transporter of food, it was a vessel of profound historical change, proving that the most ordinary commodities can sometimes wield the most extraordinary power. Silk may have defined the land routes, but the ocean carried its own even greater fortune. While camel caravans trudged across deserts, vast Chinese treasure ships, some over 100 meters long, were catching the monsoon winds, gliding across the Indian Ocean on the Maritime Silk Road. This was not a single route, but a sprawling web of sea lanes connecting the ports of southern China to the vibrant markets of Southeast Asia, the sophisticated coasts of India, and even the distant shores of East Africa. Their holds were filled with exquisite blue and white porcelain, shimmering silks, and later pungent teas, all destined for foreign rulers and wealthy merchants. In return, these ships brought back the true treasures of the tropics: fragrant black pepper from the Malabar coast, cloves from the Moluccas, and glittering gems from Sri Lankan mines. The entire system pulsed with the rhythm of the seasons, as ancient captains mastered the monsoon cycles, knowing exactly when to set sail to catch a steady wind to their destination, and when to wait for its reversal to carry them safely home. This predictable rhythm turned a terrifying, open ocean into a reliable maritime highway. Ports along this network exploded into dazzling cosmopolitan hubs where the world truly met. Malacca became a legendary city of commerce, its docks a forest of masts from a dozen different cultures, its markets a cacophony of languages bargaining for goods. Arab dhows sat beside Chinese junks and Indian vessels, creating a melting pot of ideas, faiths, and technologies. It was through these ports that Islam peacefully spread into Indonesia and Malaysia, carried not by armies, but by merchants and scholars who built mosques and communities alongside the bustling docks. The Chinese compass, a revolutionary tool for navigation, began its journey west along these sea routes, eventually transforming European exploration. These maritime pathways were the true precursors to the age of global trade, proving that the ocean was never a barrier, but the widest and most powerful road of all. The warm currents of the Maritime Silk Road give way to a world of endless ice and piercing cold. In the vast, silent expanse of the Arctic, a different kind of trade network thrived, one built not on gold or silk, but on pure survival. For thousands of years, indigenous peoples like the Inuit mastered this unforgiving environment, creating intricate trade routes across the polar ice and along the treacherous coastlines. Theirs was a commerce of necessity, a brilliant adaptation to one of the planet's most challenging landscapes. Using nimble kayaks to navigate the icy waters in summer and hardy dog sleds to traverse the frozen sea in winter, they connected scattered communities across thousands of miles. The goods they carried were the raw materials of life in the far north. Walrus ivory, prized for its strength and beauty, was traded for sturdy furs from the caribou, essential for warmth in the brutal winters. Elaborately crafted tools like ulu knives and harpoon heads made from bone and stone moved from village to village, each design refined by generations of experience. This exchange was about more than objects. It was about shared knowledge and mutual support. The success of these journeys depended on a profound, sacred understanding of the environment. Traders had to read the subtle signs of the sea ice, knowing which flows were stable and which hid deadly thin patches. They followed the migration patterns of animals, not just for hunting, but as natural pathways across the terrain. This deep wisdom, passed down through stories and songs, was the true currency of the Arctic, ensuring safe passage and fostering incredible resilience. These routes were the lifelines of culture, allowing communities separated by immense distances to maintain social bonds, share innovations, and preserve their unique way of life against all odds. They demonstrate that no environment is too harsh for human connection, and that the most enduring trade routes are often those that carry the very essence of survival itself. 28 forgotten paths, each with its own unique story, yet together they whisper a profound truth about our shared history. The relentless drive to connect, to trade, and to explore is not a modern invention, but a fundamental thread in the human story, woven long before the first strip of asphalt was ever laid. These routes reveal our incredible adaptability, showing how ancient peoples did not simply surrender to mountains, deserts, or oceans, but instead learned to read them like a map, turning terrifying obstacles into gateways of opportunity. They mastered the monsoon winds, decoded the patterns of the stars, and carved highways into the sides of cliffs, all in pursuit of connection. This ingenuity laid the groundwork for every logistical marvel that would follow, from the royal road to the global shipping lanes of today. More than just moving goods, these pathways blended commerce and culture into an inseparable mix. A caravan was never just a line of camels carrying spices. It was a moving university, carrying new languages, revolutionary technologies, and transformative faiths. Buddhist monks, Islamic scholars, and Nestorian Christians all walked alongside merchants, their ideas flowing as freely as the silks and silver. This exchange was the true engine of progress, proving that the most valuable cargo is often intangible. The rise and fall of empires were directly tied to their control over these vital arteries. A kingdom could amass legendary wealth by taxing a trade route, like the salt and gold caravans of West Africa, only to crumble into obscurity when a new sea path made that land crossing obsolete. Control of a single resource like Cornish tin or Tyrian purple could fuel an empire's expansion, while losing that control could spell its doom. These routes were the economic lifeblood, and their pulse determined the fate of civilizations. To study them is to finally see global history not as a series of isolated events, but as a deeply interconnected web, where a decision in a Roman palace could ripple all the way to a mining town in Britain, or where a storm in the Indian Ocean could alter the economy of a Chinese province. It challenges the old-fashioned view of a divided ancient world, revealing instead a planet that has always been talking, trading, and transforming together. These stories of forgotten paths invite us to look at our own world with fresh eyes, to seek out the hidden connections in our own communities, and to appreciate the ancient spirit of curiosity that still drives us to explore, to understand, and to reach across any distance to find common ground. Each of these 28 paths was an artery of the ancient world, pulsing with the lifeblood of commerce, culture, and human curiosity. They teach us a powerful lesson in resilience, showing how our ancestors transformed deserts, mountains, and oceans from obstacles into opportunities through sheer ingenuity. Their legacy is not just in the goods they moved, but in the intangible exchanges that followed, the ideas and innovations that quietly built the foundations of our modern world. These hidden pathways remind us that the desire for connection is a universal human constant, a timeless drive to reach beyond the horizon and find common ground. As you look at our own global networks of shipping lanes and flight paths, listen for the echoes of those first camel caravans and ocean-going canoes. Their stories live on in every connection we make. If this journey through history's lost highways resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the world's greatest mysteries. Let us know in the comments which of these forgotten routes fascinated you the most. Thank you for watching, and remember, to understand our present, we must always keep exploring the past.